Hello, people. Welcome back. This is the third chapter of basically being a novice rider or a rider who just started in knowing your bike. Actually, there are two things that are left that I want to talk about, two or three maybe, I don't know. But the one thing that I really wanted you to understand as a new rider, which you don't know about, and you think you know, or you think your bike is okay but is not, is suspension. In cars, if you're coming from cars, suspension is a different thing altogether. We are looking for comfort in car, we are looking for little bit of agility and all that stuff, depending on sports car and all that stuff. But in bikes it's completely different. In bikes, well, you don't know. What I have realized is you don't know until that you have bad suspension, until you have ridden a different bike with a good suspension, or somebody else who understands the bike suspension rides your bike and realizes that your suspension is bad. Because you're so used to riding your own bike, you realize, oh, this is how it rides, this is how it rides. You don't realize that by changing this various suspension settings, you can actually make your bike faster, and it goes better corners, better in control. You feel like you have more control on the bike. You feel like you can accelerate better, you can brake better. All these things, apart from the engine and all the braking and all that stuff, all those other things, suspension is a big factor of that. I don't know nothing about suspension. I am barely, I mean, compared to everybody that I know that knows suspension, I know nothing. But this is not an expert level advice. This is just an advice for a guy who's just starting on his bike and who doesn't even know that there is such a thing called suspension on the bikes. Suspension on the bikes is one of the most crucial factors of how even a low cc bike or a high cc bike can perform badly or can perform excellent based on how your suspension is. What is the suspension settings? Mostly it's 3 settings. Not all bikes will give you that option to change all these settings, but these are the settings. One is called a preload, which is how much your spring is preloaded before it even starts the work of suspension. That's called preload. Then there is compression, and then there is rebound. Compression is how much your bike, when it hits a bump, goes down, and rebound is how quickly it comes up. So these are basically the 3 settings. You have a front forks. Those are forks that are in the front, of course, with the tires. That's the front fork suspension. And then you have a rear suspension that is behind, under your seat. All these 2 suspensions are basically what is making the bike go up and down and all that stuff. Most of the bikes do have a compression and rebound settings for the rear. Some of the bikes don't have any settings in the front. It's just, that's all it is, and it's preloaded and all that stuff. So those are the bikes you will feel and understand the difference. If you look at your bike, if you have a compression rebound setting, it's just going to be on top of your forks, on the front forks. That's where it's going to be compression and rebound. It'll say C or R or left or right or whatever. And the preload, sometimes it's on the top of the fork, sometimes it's at the bottom of the fork. So you have to look up for it. You will know. You can look up your manual. And how do you set that up? Well, as I said, you will not know that you have a better setting available to you unless you ride a better setting, and then you will know, oh shit, that felt much better than what I'm used to riding. In that kind of scenario, that's why. So basically, when the bike comes from the factory, it is set up for about 160 pounds person, 140 to 160 pound person. If you are heavier than that, you need a different settings. If you are If you're riding differently, you need a different settings. If the intended purpose of the bike was something else than what the bike was intended for. What I mean by that is, let's say you buy a KLX 300, which is basically a dual sport bike. Now, if you bought a dual sport bike, the suspension is different on that. It's set up differently for a dual sport adventure setting. But if you convert it to a supermoto, which is 17-inch front wheel, 17-inch back wheel, now you're basically doing road and track on that, suspension will be different. So there is an intended purpose for the bike that you have bought, but if the intended purpose changes, you have to work with the suspension. If I buy my Street Fighter V2, I have never done track before I bought Street Fighter V2. I was only doing road and I was riding on the road. I never knew that I was doing anything with suspension. Yeah, that's how the bike is supposed to be. All right, okay. Then I did a track one day and I realized people were talking about suspension. I'm like, what do you mean suspension? Well, lo and behold, 2 or 3 track days later, I went to a suspension guy. He set up my suspension, Washington Cycles, by the way, in New Jersey. And then, I understood what the hell they were talking about. The bike was completely different. Bike was in more control and all that stuff. Then, of course, I went with Dave Moss. I talked to Dave Moss a couple of times. He's a big tuning guy, if you guys want to Google it up. And he just changed my understanding of the whole thing. Body position is a lot of problems. All that other things. Suspension is, other than the, engine, everybody understands. It's pretty much a number. Torque, you will feel it. But suspension is something that you will not understand until and unless you experiment with it. You will not know how bad your suspension is or how good your suspension is until you have ridden a good suspension bike or a bad suspension bike. So experiment with it. That means if you're riding a bike, try to make it softer, loosen the compression, loosen the rebound. When you read through your manual, you will understand what I'm talking about, loosening or tightening and all that stuff. Preload and all that. These are basically the terms that you're looking for. Preload, compression and rebound. But start with the softer setting. When you look at your manual, it will say this is what the setting is for a 160 pound, 170 pound guy. If you're a heavier guy, you need a little more preload because your spring needs to support a lot more weight. If you're a lighter guy, yeah, you probably can adjust the rebound or compression a little bit to make it a little feel better. But at the end of the day, know your suspension. Even if you don't know anything right now and today when you're listening to this, start understanding it. Start experimenting it. It's called clicks. You can go click left, anti-clockwise, clockwise, makes compression softer, harder. Bigger bikes or better bikes will say S or H. Make it S, make it softer, make it harder, and you will understand what you like better. And it is very important because the same bike that you're riding with bad suspension and the same bike that you ride with suspension that is set up for you is going to change everything as far as riding goes. Make sure you understand how bad your suspension is or how good your suspension is. And how do you do that? You do that by experimenting with it. Preload, compression, rebound. These are the 3 things you have to look for. Experiment with it. Compression means how the bike goes down. Rebound means how it comes up, how quickly it comes up, how quickly it goes down. Preload means already the spring is loaded with some kind of power to it, so it doesn't feel like it is bumping too much. So these are the things you have to look for. Work on your suspension. Go to a local suspension guy. Talk to him. Make sure it's set up for you. Talk to him and understand him, where you want to go, what you want to do with it. There is Bibles and Bibles can be written on these things. But I'm telling you, there is, I don't know nothing, but I know this much. And what I know is now what you know. Work on your suspension. That's my next step in knowing your bike.